Hey, what's up, guys? Combat Critic here. Let's take a look at this upcoming fight between Vicente Luque and Ian Gary. Let's get started. If we talk about the records of these two guys, starting with Vicente Luque. So, Luque has 32 fights in total and he's won 22 fights and lost 9. If we talk about his 22 wins, 11 of them have been via knockout, 8 of them have been via submission, and just 3 via decision. So, this man is a finisher. Most of his wins have been knockouts or submission wins. If we talk about his nine losses, he has been knocked out just once. He has been submitted twice, and 6 times he has lost via decision. His records when it comes to decision alone is not that great. He has 3 wins and 6 losses. He also has a draw on his record. Now let's take a look at Ian Gary's record. So Ian is 13-0 right now. If we talk about his 13 wins, he has 7 of them via knockout, just 1 via submission, and another 5 via decision. So this man does not really have a lot of submissions, but he has a lot of knockouts, and he is 5-0 in decision. Now let's talk about the physical and career stats of both these guys. Starting with the height, it is 5'11 for Vicente Luque and 6'3 for Ian Gary. So Ian Gary is a really tall welterweight and he will have a 4-inch height advantage. Weight will be even at 170 pounds for both these guys. Reach is 75 inches for Luque and it is 74 inches for Ian Gary. So a slight 1-inch reach advantage goes to Luque. Stance is orthodox for both these guys. And if we talk about the age, Luque is clearly the older guy and Ian Gary is younger by about 6 years. Age can definitely play a factor in this fight. Whenever you have two guys where the age difference is more than 5 years, the younger guy wins almost two-thirds of the time, and this can definitely play in Ian Gary's favor. Now let's talk about the career stats. Starting with the strikes landed per minute, this signifies the number of significant strikes that you land on your opponent per minute on average. This is 5.17 for Luque and it is 6.67 for Gary. So Gary will have an advantage here. He is landing a lot more significant strikes on his opponents per minute. Striking accuracy is 52% for Luque and it is 56% for Gary. So again, Gary has an advantage. He is more accurate with his strikes. Next up, we have strikes absorbed per minute. Now, this is the amount of strikes that you take from your opponent per minute. This is 5.15 for Luque, which is a really high number, and it is 3.58 for Ian Gary. So, Ian Gary has an advantage here. He is getting hit lesser compared to Luque. Striking defense is 52% for Luque and it is 53% for Ian Gary. So a very slight advantage again goes to Ian Gary. Overall, these 4 metrics were the striking metrics and all of them favor Ian Gary. He is the better striker in this fight. Now let's talk about the wrestling and the grappling stats. Starting with the takedown average, it is 1.04 for Luque and 0.67 for Ian Gary. So here for the first time, Luque has an advantage. Takedown accuracy is 60% for Luque and it is 75% for Ian Gary. So Ian Gary has an advantage here. I don't know how many takedowns Ian has attempted in the UFC, but just from looking at these stats, he has an advantage. Takedown defense is 62% for Luque and it is 69% for Ian Gary. So again, an advantage goes to Gary. Submission average is zero point 0.7 for Luque. He has some submission wins in the UFC, whereas it is 0 for Ian Gary. Ian Gary has never attempted a submission in the UFC so far. So the obvious advantage here goes to Luque. Overall, in the striking, this fight clearly favors Ian Gary, whereas in the wrestling, I think it is pretty close. If this fight hits the ground, if Luque is somehow able to take down Ian Gary, then the fight favors him because he has submission wins in the UFC. Now let's take a look at significant strikes by position for both these guys. Starting with Luque, 88% of all his strikes are from the standing position, 6% from the clinch, and 6% on the ground. If we compare this with Ian Gary, 91% of all his strikes are from the standing position, just 4% from the clinch and 5% on the ground. So both these guys really like to stand and bang. Nobody really likes to go to the clinch or go to the ground. Now let's take a look at the significant strikes by target. starting with Luque. 61% of all his strikes are to the head, 13% to the body, and a significant 25% to the leg. If we compare this with Ian Garry, 57% of all his strikes are to the head, 20% to the body, so he goes to the body more often than Luque, and 23% to the leg. So both these guys throw about the equal number of leg kicks. Now let's take a look at some of the previous performances of these two guys, starting with Luque. So Luque in his last fight beat RDA, and this was a great win for him. A lot of people were picking RDA to win this fight, but Vicente Luque shocked everyone and he won the fight via unanimous decision. It was a 5-round fight, and this happened in August of 2023. Luque landed 8 takedowns on RDA, and RDA landed 2 takedowns over Luque. And Luque was also ahead slightly in terms of the number of strikes landed. Before this, however, Luque lost to Jeff Neal via knockout in the third round, and in this fight, Jeff Neal was ahead and he got 2 knockdowns over Vicente Luque, one of which led to the finish. And before this, Luque also lost to Bilal Muhammad, and he was actually ahead in terms of the strikes landed, but Bilal landed 5 takedowns over Luque to win the fight via unanimous decision. Before this, Luque beat Michael Chiesa in the very first round via darts choke. He beat Tyron Woodley also via darts choke in the very first round. He beat Randy Brown via knockout in the second round. He got 2 knockdowns, as well as he was slightly ahead in terms of the strikes landed. He beat Nico Price via knockout in the third round, and before that he lost to Stephen Wonderboy Thompson, and in this fight Wonderboy Thompson outpointed him and outstruck him, got a knockdown as well, and he was able to win a unanimous decision. So he is a solid fighter. I think he really worked on his wrestling after the Bilal Muhammad loss, and it showed in the RDA fight. He was able to take down RDA 8 times, and RDA has good takedown defense. I think he should try to do the same in this fight. If he stands with Ian Garry, he has very little chance, but if he takes the fight to the ground, he has better submissions than Ian Garry. This is the path that he should take. Now let's talk about some of the previous fights of Ian Garry. So Ian Garry, who is undefeated right now, in his last fight beat Neil Magny, and this was a masterclass performance. He was massively ahead in terms of the strikes landed, as well as he got 2 takedowns over Neil Magny. Before this fight, he beat Daniel Rodriguez via knockout kick in the very first round. He beat Song Kinan via knockout in the third round. He was again massively ahead in terms of the strikes landed. However, Keenan got 2 takedowns as well as a knockdown over Ian Garry, and before this, Ian Garry beat Gabe Green by unanimous decision in a 3-round fight. He was ahead in terms of the strikes landed, as well as he got 1 takedown and 1 knockdown. Before this, Ian Garry beat Darian Weeks, and he was again ahead in terms of the strikes landed. However, Weeks was able to take him down, and before this fight, he beat Jordan Williams via knockout in the very first round. So this man is looking really solid. He is getting quite a few knockdowns in the UFC. And however, if you look at the number of takedowns, he has been taken down by Song Kinnan twice, by Gabe Green, and by Darian Weeks. So I think Vicente Luque should try to test his wrestling. Nobody really tested his wrestling. Nobody of a high caliber fighter has tested the wrestling of Ian Garry. Vicente Luque should definitely do this. However, if I have to pick a winner, I'll go with Ian Garry. I think he is the younger fighter. He has better striking, and even if Vicente Luque tries to shoot, I'm not sure if Vicente Luque will get the takedown because Ian Garry has good takedown defense. For all these reasons, I'm picking him to win the fight. Let me know what you guys think in the comments below. I'll see you guys in the next video.